We question our daily position, seeking answers and definitions. Get the queries off your chest with Ahkam SOS.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Ahkam SOS, the show that discusses Islamic duties and practices. This is a live show on Monday night, and if you have a question you'd like to ask us, you can send it in via the WhatsApp. You can email us on ahkamsos@imamhussein3.tv, or alternatively give us a call in the live studio, and inshallah, me and the Sheikh are going to be able to answer your question. I'm your host, Mohsin Shah, and joining me is Sheikh Ali Ma'a. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikhna.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Sheikhna, how was your Eid? Eid Mubarak to you.
Great.
Eid Mubarak to all the viewers as well. Inshallah, there was
Mubarak,
you didn't eat too much meat, but inshallah it was, full of taqwa and spirituality, and you enjoyed yourself a little bit as well.
Inshallah.
Sheikhna, we finished Hajj, mashallah. We're coming towards Ghadir and obviously the holy month of Harap. So during this period, inshallah, we're going to have different questions, miscellaneous, some from the WhatsApp, and some that people have emailed us in, and some from our own producers, inshallah. Let us begin tonight's episode with this question, which is, when I'm at home and I pray salah, can my wife, my daughter, can they pray next to me?
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين. In the opinion of Ayatollah Sistani, he mentions that he issues a fatwa that no, they must be separated from each other, and I think at least 5 meters distance between each. They shouldn't stand next to each other and pray. And this is not jama'ah, this is furada.
Okay.
This is furada, basically. So they have to be away at least 5 meters from each other. Otherwise the salah would be mushkil in terms of the validity of salah. So they shouldn't be next to each other anyhow. Ayatollah Shirazi would say that no, they are allowed. Contrary to the fatwa Ayatollah Sistani, that they are allowed to pray near each other, so there shouldn't be a problem.
So this is like we're talking about mahram, as in like your wife or your daughter, someone you're married to or someone you can't marry, going to Sayyid Sadiq Shirazi, Hafidhullah.
In overall, the females who pray next to you,
yes.
A female individual who prays next to you, near you, basically, are they allowed or allowed? As I've said, 2 different opinions.
Wow.
So you follow your marja when it comes to
Fantastic. You mentioned Ayatollah Sistani, Hafidhullah. So Sayyid Eminence Ayatollah Sayyid Sistani, Hafidhullah, has this opinion, true or not, in regards to closing your eyes during salah, it is makruh. Does he have this opinion, or is this some rumours?
Yes, the Sayyid mentions that it is permissible, basically, to have your eyes closed while you pray, but it's makruh. Sadly, we had this in the time of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, when some of the so-called scholars from other sects, they try to see how the Imam prays and try to change the hukum in their own fiqh. So, does the Imam close his eyes or open his eyes and so forth.
I see.
So the problem began from that time, basically, on how they tried to change the ahkam, and you can see the ahkam changed, top to bottom. In all aspects of fiqh and jurisprudence, they have changed the ahkam in Hajj and Salah and Sawm and everything.
True. Even when we say Bismillah aloud, other schools have thought they don't, and so forth, and they also they stand different. Talking about ahkam, Sheikhna, when it comes to the mustahab acts in regards to the janazah, the funeral ceremony, Ayatollah Sistani, Hafidhullah, what does he recommend us to do when it comes to the funeral ceremony?
The Sayyid mentions that it's mustahab that when the persons who attend the funeral of someone, they have departed, so that's their friends, those who they know, for example, the neighbors that left after the funeral session, the guardian of the dead person, those who are close to the dead individual, they should recite the prescribed supplications and dua.
Okay.
Seems to be there are specific dua to be recited for the deceased ones. So if they can actually recite this dua for the dead person. He also mentions that it's mustahab for the after the burial, of course, after the defn, that the bereaved family is consoled.
Yes.
But it shouldn't take much time in giving, you know, the condolences to this family, in which it would bring their memories back.
I see.
You know, you don't have to go for the next 3-4 weeks and give aza and ta'ziyah and so forth. So it's just a few days.
Yes.
And he also says in these few days, it's mustahab that food be sent to the family of the deceased for the first 3 days. So let's say the wife lost her husband.
Yes.
Now she is with her orphaned children.
Yes.
So it's mustahab to send, you know, let's say the lunch, the dinner, to the house of this family of the deceased for the next 3 days, until they calm down from this tragedy or calamity, and to ease their situation. So you try to help them by providing them food, for example. I know some families would even go and stay overnight. Let's say the aunties, for example, the cousin, the uncles, they would go and stay with that family for the next 3 days, just to comfort and calm down the family of the deceased.
Indeed, especially if they're coming from far away. I remember there was a death in my family, and all my cousins and stuff from Bradford and stuff all came down, and they all stayed with my family for a couple of days. So yeah, it does happen. It's very common. Moving on from, you know, the death ceremony, funeral ceremony, Sheikh, now to marriage. Now, is it permissible for a permanent marriage with a member of the Ahl al-Kitab? Is this acceptable? Indefinite marriage with Ahl al-Kitab?
Yes, it is allowed, although Ayatollah Shirazi mentions that as a mustahab precaution it should be avoided, which doesn't mean it should be wajib avoided, but mustahab to avoid it. It depends, maybe there are other statements that might mention about marrying the Ahl al-Kitab. In overall, we have in-depth details of some ulama about marrying Ahl al-Kitab. So we have to go back to the alim that we follow to see what they would mention and indicate about marrying Ahl al-Kitab. Of course, definitely marrying non-Ahl al-Kitab is not allowed, other than Ahl al-Kitab. Otherwise, a Muslim can get married to a Muslim. There's no issue at all, even to the non-Shia as well, as long as the aqeedah of the Shia individual is protected and immune from being deviated to the other sects. So as long as you protect and you preserve your aqeedah of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, you can get married. But in overall, the marriage to Ahlul Kitab is allowed. It's better to avoid it due to some of the consequences might occur in future. For example, maybe the children might incline towards their brother, for example, in the aqeedah, in the belief. They would rather go to the church rather than going to the mosque.
If you look at our dietary, we have a halal diet. Obviously, Ahl Kitab some of them don't have the similar diet to us at all. Alcohol, pork, and so forth. Can be issues marrying.
I know an individual who actually got married to a Christian girl, and finally, after they had kids, after 17 years of living, she kicked out the husband, the Muslim husband, the Shia Muslim husband from the house, and called the police, and then she became a disbeliever. I mean, you know, a secular, some kind of atheist, let's say. She stopped even believing in Jesus and Christianity, so became atheist. So imagine things might happen in the next couple of years. You don't know. So it's better that we keep our marriages within the boundaries of, as the hadith says, that marry the one who comes to you. Marry him if he has faith and akhlaq and ethics, morality. خلقه ودينه. Two most important conditions and criteria for the marriage. So he's got deen, he's got aqeedah, then and akhlaq as well, beside to the aqidah, then marry this individual. Otherwise, you have to find the best person.
Inshallah. Also, this is only to do with men, isn't it? I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but Muslim females can't marry a man from Ahl Kitab. They can only marry a Muslim man. So it's only the male that can marry from Ahl Kitab, a woman from the Ahl Kitab, not the females can marry men from the Ahl Kitab. Doesn't work like
it's
that.
vice versa only. Women from the Muslims cannot marry Ahl Kitab, a Christian man. Although it happened. I've been hearing that some Muslims got married to Christian. I mean, away from the Ahkam and the Aqidah. They just fell in love and that's it, they got married. So, no, you're not allowed to get married if you're a Muslim female to a non-Muslim male. And overall, it's not allowed.
Moving on, Sheikh, now a question we got in from the WhatsApp, and that is it permissible to celebrate the death anniversaries of the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
Don't forget that we have the tawalli and tabarri, or tawalla tabarra.
Yes.
So we have to celebrate both. When it comes to the wilaya, we celebrate the wilaya, like the Ghadir, the upcoming event of Ghadir, inshallah, we celebrate. And of course, those who breached the criteria of the Ghadir, those who stepped over this oath and this ahd from Allah Azza wa Jal, although they gave bay'ah on the day of Ghadir, but they broke this ahd and oath. But when their death time comes and approaches, we have to celebrate, of course. But in overall, it should be in the boundary of Islam teachings, and it shouldn't go outside the boundary of Islamic teachings and ethics. Basically, I've seen in some, for example, celebrating of such events, that they play music and even dance. So we shouldn't go beyond the boundaries of the Sharia and Ahkam and Islam. Celebrate, bring a lecturer to speak about the enemies of Allah, why we celebrate for this occasion, and the wilaya as well. Why do we believe in the wilaya, for example? And of course, you can bring somebody who reads maddahi and qasida and poetry. That's fine. But with the boundary of ahkam and akhlaq as well, ethics and faith, of course.
Speaking of boundaries, Sheikhna, I don't know if you're familiar, but with cup reading, have you ever seen cup reading, or when people read tea leaves and so forth? Are we allowed to participate in such things for entertainment purposes only? So, fortune telling via tea leaves, cup reading, Islamically acceptable for entertainment purposes only, not that we are to believe in what this individual is telling us.
You see, initially, there is ethical side to this matter, or moral side to this matter, that we shouldn't ruin and waste our time with these entertainments. Sometimes something entertaining is good, to go out to the parks, to see the nature, for example, walk through the forests and so forth, some other enjoyments and entertainments. But sometimes these are wasteful acts of entertainment. In overall, as a hukum shar'i, there's no objection. The one can basically enjoy himself with the others, reading cups and so forth, as long as there's no haram associated with this act. And that means, for example, to disapprove or prove someone's lineage, that I can read that you don't belong to your dad.
Oh, wow.
This current dad. For example, it could happen, I don't know. Or for example, this individual is the real thief, who actually, broke into your house last night, for example. So, call the police, for example. So you can't actually make hukum and judge using such, cup reading and so forth. But overall, it's allowed, away from the haram, of course.
I see. Shaykh, last question before we go to the break is that there's an individual who lives in a Western country and buys his fish from the Chinese food store. Is it Islamically acceptable for him to purchase fish from the Chinese food store? Considering I think what they're trying to get is that the Chinese aren't Muslims, they have their own religion. Some of them, majority are Buddhist, but some are secular, they don't have a religion. Buying fish from the Chinese superstore, Islamically acceptable or not?
There are two main conditions for buying and eating fish. Number one, the one should make sure that it's got scales on the body of the fish. That's important. Phallus or scales must be on the fish. Number 2, must be caught by a human being and brought out of the water, and so dies outside water, not inside the water.
Okay.
So we have to check:
Yes.
do the Chinese kill their fish inside the water by electric shock? I don't know what means they use.
It used to be Americans used to throw a grenade or dynamite, blow up. And
So
all
you
the
have to
fish
check, you have to investigate that. Do they actually do it in this way, or naturally with a net they pull it out and the fish dies outside water? Because we don't have that condition of like the halal meat and chicken to be done by the Muslim. For the fish, anyone can hunt, Muslim or non-Muslim.
Yes, I see. Thank you very much, Sheikh. I'm going to go to a break right now. Join us after the break as we continue the discussion with these miscellaneous questions in regards to Islamic Ahkam. After the break, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Ahkam SOS, the show that discusses Islamic duties and practices. If you have a question you'd like to send in, send it via the WhatsApp, send it via the email, ahkamsos@imamhussein3.tv. Alternatively, give us a call on the phone number, should be on the bottom somewhere. And inshallah, me and the Sheikh will be able to discuss and answer your question. Assalamu alaikum, Sheikhna.
Assalamu alaikum.
Sheikhna, my next question is in regards to the mujtahids and the marja'iyah. Now, it can be very, very difficult for someone who's become balugh to, search and find a marja that they feel is, adil and alim and, relates to them and so forth. And for some of us, we inherit our marja, from our parents, and we just continue following because that's the household we were raised in. If an individual discovers that another mujtahid is maybe a bit more learned or a bit more better qualified than the mujtahid they're following at present, the marja that they follow at present, are we supposed to change there and then? Can we change mujtahids from one living one to another living one?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In overall, it is permissible to change your marja to the other marja if one learns that he is more knowledgeable. In overall, you have to ask the experts in this field. You cannot just jump from the taqlid of one marja to another without asking the experts in this field, the reps, the ulama, fudala, they are out there in the hawza, to ask before you actually make this decision. Because I've heard even some people wanted to come back to their original marja. So it's not like the game in which you can, refund, get your refunds back. And no, it's actually to do with aqidah, religion, with ahkam. So it's important that the one makes the right decision in this field. And of course, we have this discussion in the fiqh, in the beginning of the Risala Amaliyah and the books of the fiqh about the a'lamiyya, or the most knowledgeable, that you have to follow the one who is a'lam, who is most knowledgeable. And to define the a'lamiyya is a bit awkward, difficult, that that you get to the consensus that with others, with the ulama, that this individual is the a'lam. It's difficult to find to define somebody who is a'lam. But overall, when you ask the expert, they would point out to this individual that he is a'lam. From our investigation, research, reading his works, his fiqhi books, usuli books, he seems to be more a'lam than others in this field. So you can rely on to the statements of those experts, and you follow this marja to be your marja. That should be fine, inshallah.
Inshallah. And just in case you're looking for a marja, we have plenty on my shoulder right here, inshallah. Sheikhna, when it comes to live sports on television, or even attending to watch a live game, here in the West, especially in England, football is arguably the most popular. People spend hundreds and thousands of pounds to watch some of the best athletes, you could say, in the world play this game. Even at the TV channel, we've got so many football fans here. Islamically speaking, is it okay for us to watch live sports, Olympics, track and field, rugby, boxing, even any of these live sports that are televised? Are we allowed to watch it on television? Are we allowed to go and attend and watch it live?
In in overall, it is permissible and allowed for the one to watch or attend these sports events and watch them live. I mean, by being present in the stadium or from your own TV, or your own home. But in overall, you have to avoid the haram aspects of these events, such as the music, dance, concerts. If there are female, let's say, athletes, especially in Olympics, that they are playing, you shouldn't look at them as a man. Shouldn't look at the females who are wearing improper clothing or very tight clothes. So the one should be able to distinguish between the haram and the halal. You know, that this is halal. It's just a football. Halal. We all can watch it. That's fine. There's no music. There's no, let's say, indecent scenes. It's just players in the middle of the pitch. They're playing football, and that's it. Alhamdulillah, halal. There's no issue with it. But if any haram associated with this, as I've said, indecent scene, improper women wearing, let's say, improper clothes, for example, music, dance, and so forth, the ones should avoid it.
I see. Shaykhna, when it comes to the temporary marriage, mut'ah, and when the male and female, when they discuss a time period and then discuss the mahar, if the mahar is not specifically specified, is the mut'ah still valid? For example, if they're discussing, and the female says, "Oh, you have to take me out to a restaurant, 3 times. That's the mahar I want." But she didn't specify which restaurant, what sort of food, how much should the bill be, and anything. It was just very vague, Or if they said, "Oh, just buy me some jewelry." What jewelry? Original, plastic, artificial, costume, things like that. So it's very vague. Is the mut'ah still valid, or even if the mahar is not specified correctly?
The amount of the mahar must be specified. Basically, when you read the aqd, it says في المدة المعلومة على المهر المعلوم. The mahar is معلوم.
Okay.
Is known. The mudda, the period is known. Is it 10 days, 30 days, 2 years, 5 years?
Yes.
These must be known to each other. You don't have to mention it in the aqd. But between you and her, you must have been decided and agreed on that it's this much and this length, the mahar and the time. So these must be specified in the aqd.
Okay, Ahsan. Shaykhna, in Islam, we have a very, very strong, you could say, we are against idols and idol worshipping. Even the stories of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wa alihi and Imam Ali alayhi salam together destroying the idols inside the Kaaba and so forth. One could argue that today, children's toys like stuffed animals or even like dolls, action figures, do they classify as idols as well? And considering how many children play with them and we purchase them, are we allowed to purchase them as Muslims? Are we allowed to let our children play with these toys?
Yes, they are permissible to be owned and used as toys for children. That's fine. But the argument or the discussion is about the one who makes them. Because there's a discussion in the fiqh about making the shapes of human or animals. The ruh, the one has ruh and soul. So you make a shape out of, let's say, an animal or a human being. Is that allowed? This is the argument or discussion in the fiqh books about if it's allowed, not allowed. That's the one for the one who makes them. But you buying them for your children, that's fine. There's no issue with it. So the whole argument is about, is it allowed for the individual to make them in his manufacturing company or in his own, for example, an individual who makes crafts and so forth, is he allowed to engrave and such like do other things other than, let's say, the dolls and toys? So that's the discussion. But in overall, for you to buy them for your children, that's actually fine.
Oh, that's fine. There's no issues with that.
Yeah.
Excellent. Shaykhna, question from the email. I've heard many rules about whether or not girls who have reached puberty and wear hijab can show their feet in front of men. Is it haram in Islam? So in order to be barefoot, for females to be barefoot in front of men, acceptable or not acceptable?
The feet must be covered. In overall, for the sisters and those who have reached, the girls reached the age of bulugh, the only parts of the body in which they're allowed to show is the handcuffs, not even the wrists, the handcuff,
Yeah.
basically, and the face, the circle part. So it's just the face itself, not further than the qurs al-wajh, the circle part.
Yes.
So they shouldn't show the ears, for example, or the under the chin, and so forth. These are not allowed. But in overall, the face and the handcuffs are allowed to be shown. The rest of the body must be covered.
I see. MashaAllah. Shaykhna, continuing with the ahkam for females, majority of females in our community have very, very long hair. Can be difficult to wash at times as well. When it comes to ghusl and so forth, how are they supposed to wash the hair? In terms of, if they've got really, really long hair, is it sufficient just to wash the hair on the head? Must they wash the whole hair all the way down? How does it work? Sheikh Ayatollah, His Eminence Ayatollah Sheikh Wahid Khurasani discusses this, doesn't he?
Yes, the Sheikh mentions that during the ghusl, the one must wash also the short hair attached to the skin, to the body. That is also must be washed in the ghusl. But for the long hair, it's not wajib or obligatory. So as long as the water reaches the scalp, for example, the head scalp, through washing the short parts of the hair attached to the head, that should be fine.
So the roots.
The roots, yeah, exactly.
Washing the roots.
That should be fine, and the ghusl will be correct. But he says, however, the hair must also be washed if water cannot reach the scalp without basically wetting it.
Okay. So you wash the roots, and if the water cannot get to the roots, you have to wash the hair.
Yes.
As well.
That's the main thing.
Because
it has to reach the skin or the scalp.
I see.
In other words.
Okay. Interesting.
That's for the ghusl, of course.
MashaAllah. Shaykhna, going towards a medical question now, and in terms of najasa and tahara, using tools for operations and surgery and so forth. Let's say I've put a camera in to a patient. The camera was tahir. It goes into the patient now. Obviously, it's touched certain parts of the body, blood and so forth. It's najis. When I remove the camera and there is no sign of any najasa on it, the camera, is it tahir or najis?
I mean, yes, the tool would be tahir because you haven't seen any najasa on this tool, be it a needle or camera and so forth. You haven't seen any najasa because the thing becomes najis when it becomes apparent and on the surface of the body. The inside, you can't call it najasa. Otherwise, how can we pray?
True.
And we have the blood inside ourselves if it's najis. No, when it gushes out, the blood gushes out or is appeared on the body or the clothes, then it becomes najis. Otherwise, if you have pulled out the needle or the camera or the tube with no particles of najasa, it's tahir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Final question, Sheikh. Now, interesting one as well. Came in via the email. Is it permissible for a woman to marry a Catholic man who agrees to practice Islam, pray, fast, stop drinking, eat halal, but he doesn't believe in Islam? Now, we were discussing before in regards to Ahl Kitab and so forth. So this individual, he agrees, you could say, to do the practical side, which is, to refrain from alcohol, only eat halal meat, pray salah, fast, maybe go Hajj as well. Lakin he hasn't accepted the aqaid, the theology of Islam. Is it permissible for a lady to marry such a man?
Well, that is not permissible because this individual still remains as Catholic or Christian. He is not converted to Islam fully. Maybe he's partially converted in terms of the amal, in terms of the furu', which is salah, sawm, hajj, but not the usul. The most important is the usul, not the furu'.
Yes, yeah.
The usul is the main thing in the aqidah. Otherwise, anyone can come. I remember I've seen one of the very first Salah Jama'ah that took place after the revolution in Iran in 1980s. I see the first line, there were a couple of non-Muslims attending the Salah Jama'ah as well. So Christian, priests, and maybe other religions. And they were praying with the Muslims,
MashaAllah.
the Salah Jama'ah. But their Salah wasn't, of course, complete Salah. There was no sujood, just a ruku', maybe half ruku'. But their Salah wasn't a submission to Islam fully, because they're still, the priest is still a Christian, the rabbi is still a Jew. They haven't converted to Islam, but they came to participate in this is a praying to Allah Azza wa Jalla, to God, for example. So we pray to God as well in our own way, but we follow the Islamic way of Salah, ruku' and so forth. But that's not actually, we can say that they are now Muslims. Khalas, alhamdulillah, we have now 2 or 3 alim of the non-Muslims became Muslims after revolution, for example. One of the signs of the revolution, for example. No, that's not actually a sign of it. So for the one who wants to actually, for the female Muslim who wants to get married to a male from Christian or Ahl Kitab, he must convert to Islam first with Aqidah. He does the Shahadatain, believes in Islam, and when he becomes a Muslim, he can marry her. That's fine. Because Allah Azza wa Jalla would accept only Islam as a Aqidah and belief. إن الدين عند الله الإسلام. Nothing else would accept it. And the same applies to those who, from the non-Shia, from other sects of Muslims, who want to get married to a Shia woman, for example, who would say that we're going to come to your majalis, we pray behind your imams, we eat with you in the ma'atim, and commemorate, celebrate, we attend all your majalis, but we still keep with our aqidah. We say the same thing, that you have to, if you want to gain the shafa'at of Ahl Bayt, if you want to gain the true path of Islam, is to join this great belief of Ahl Bayt alayhim as-salam, Muhammad wa Muhammad salamullah alayhim. Otherwise, you'll be half, half Shia, half Sunni, and that's not gonna work. Allah gave only one heart and one aql to us, not 2 hearts. You cannot have 2 hearts. One is for Ahlul Bayt and one is for the enemies of Ahlul Bayt. You can't gather them in one place or in 2 hearts, because you don't have 2 hearts. You have 1 heart only, and that 1 heart can only accept one side. So you have to make the choice for the right side. Let me just mention a hadith, or actually it's a sermon from Imam Ali alayhi salam in Medina. He gave a sermon in Medina. Basically, the Imam talks about the Imamah. Briefly, I'll just mention just 1 or 2 lines of the sermon. He says, أيها الناس إن المنتحلين للإمامة من غير أهلها كثير. O people, those who pretend to be imams over people, but without going back to the right people, they're lots. We have the Amawi Abbasids, when they came, they said we are imams, we are khulafa Rasulullah. They played with religion a lot. ولو لم تتخاذلوا عن مر الحق ولم تهنوا عن توهين الباطل لم يتشجع عليكم. If it wasn't for you, O people, who ignored and your negligence in terms of being with the haqq and criticizing the batil, they wouldn't have the ability and the support to lead the ummah. It's your fault, O people. In some cases, the people are who left Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam alone, as happened after the demise of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When he passed away, majority left. انقلبتم على أعقابكم, as the Quran says. They turned against the hills. So the Imam talks to people. So the people should go back to the true and real leaders of Islam.
Ahsan. Thank you very much, Sheikh Noran. Thank you to all the viewers for joining us on this episode of Ahkam SOS. Inshallah, we'll be back on Wednesday at 6:30 here on Imam Hussein TV3. If you have a question you'd like to ask, we don't need to know your name, don't need to know where you're asking from. Send it in via the WhatsApp, the email address ahkamsos@imamhussein3.tv, or alternatively give us a call here in the studio. Inshallah, the Sheikh will be able to answer your question. Join us again on Wednesday at 6:30. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
We question our daily position, seeking answers and definitions. Gather queries of your chest with Ahkam SOS.